Well, welcome everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to be hosting this with Vestex and Sierra. I'll get a quick space to be able to introduce ourselves with this. So thank you. Before we get rolling with any of this, if there's any questions, the chat will be open for you to drop the questions there, and we'll be able to answer as many of those questions at the end of our conversation. So this webinar is about CAFTA-DR sourcing sustainably, building a better future. We believe that the CAFTA-DR region will be part of the future of being able to have a more sustainable supply chain. That's what we wanted to talk today, the insights, what we're seeing coming up in the future. For those who are not familiar with me, my name is Pablo Hernandez. I'm the Business Development and Marketing Manager for Sierra. And with me, I have Karen De Leon, Director of Investment for the Apparel and Textile Sector, Vestex, and Andrea Hernandez, Marketing Access and Environmental Analyst for Vestex. Let them introduce a little bit about Vestex in a second, but for those who are not familiar with Sierra, we're the largest yarn supplier in the Western Hemisphere. And this legacy began over 50 years ago. And this is why this matters to us, to be able to keep growing this, being able to keep growing the region for a more sustainable environment, more sustainable future moving forward. You might have noticed in the past as GK fiber and yarn, or GK is spinning along the way. But that changed to this new name, evolving name that we're having this year. And part of that is like meaning a chain of mountains that we believe that building a more sustainable future cannot be that alone. We have to partner through people like Vestex and different industry leaders. And that's why we want to have these conversations, to be able to start talking about what are some of the things that we need to do moving forward to be able to have a more sustainable supply chain in the textile industry. The reason why this matters specifically for Sierra is because of the practices that we've had for a long time, everything from water consumption, treatment of water, and the goals that we have even by 2030. And we believe we cannot do that alone. As I was saying, up to 70% of our energy is like energy we produce ourselves. The water treatment we have along the way, we treat our own water to not use water from the environment. We've planted over 200,000 trees, and the amount of water bottles is over 250 million that we've recycled up to this point. Deficiency, and all of this brings us to 2030, and like we want to bring people along the way to be able to do that. So it has to make also sense from an economical perspective, and that's why I have Andrea and Karen to be able to discuss in detail why does this even matter to the region specifically. We feel very confident in what the CAFTA-DR region is doing, even with the amount that we've invested up to this point. Over the last couple of years, it goes over 265 million. And we want to keep doing that. And we want to keep partnering with people like Vestex and like the other industry leaders to do this. So I'll leave this space to Karen and Andrea to be able to tell us a little bit about Vestex, who they are, and how can we partner together to grow what's the CAFTA-DR region.
Well, thank you so much, Pablo, and thanks for the Sierra team for the interest in organizing this seminar and seeking the alliance with Vestex to be able to share important information. Well, first, Vestex is the Textile and Apparel Association in Guatemala. We represent all the supply chain of the industry, and we have different areas to support the companies to make easier the road to export and to invest in Guatemala. Well, before reviewing some important figures and data about the CAFTA-DR region and the evolution it has been in the recent years, I want to comment about the sectorial organization that exists and the role that play. In each of the countries, in each of the countries in the region, there is a business chamber which represents the sector before public and private entities internally. Vestex in Guatemala, Cantex in El Salvador, H&M in Honduras, and AIT in Costa Rica, and Adozona in Dominican Republic. So even though there is a regional council that is called SECATEC-DR, we work together only in 3 policy issues, especially in the monitoring policies of our main trading partner, the United States. So in terms of promotion or investment, each country has a different organization and structure. To give you an example, we can pass the slide, please. Thank you. To give you an example of sector work, I would like to mention that currently two of the major issues that are being followed up on, because also our policies and regulations of the US, they directly or indirectly affect our industry. So the first one is the application of US LPA, the legislation regards forced labor. We are working to see how the region turns the issue of traceability into a competitive advantage. And the other one is de minimis, actually more than 485 million of package that enters in US, mainly from China, without controls on regulation of origin or any other regulation. So the supply chain of our region is being affected. Now, coming back to the other issues that are handled different way in each country, I can let you know that in the case of Guatemala, Vestex has an area that supports buyers or potential investors in the sector to be able to provide them with everything necessary to prospect for their business and new investment. Well, starting with a brief analysis of the region, has shown the graph, the capital region is the third largest supplier apparel in the US market. Of the total import of garment, 56 are cotton clothing, 43% are synthetic fiber clothing, and then say a much smaller percent are wool and other fiber garments. And doing a breakdown to see in the region part of the graph that of the total of these apparel import, which are more than $8 billion, 56%. Well, I already mentioned the percent of the cotton and synthetic garments. Next. Now to show you how the capital region has been in constant evolution, we must look back, and this graphic show how before free trade agreement, the region has a major producer of cotton garment. The change is since companies has been seeking greater use of benefits of the free trade agreement. For example, in the case of synthetics, if the companies apply the yarn forward rule, the garment can be imported in the US duty-free instead of paying 30 or 32% of the duties. So mainly due its proximity to the North American market, the region has always been attractive for investment in this sector. Some of them big brands established their own production plants, which to a large extent to give a Central American region the reputation as a producer of basic products. Next. But we can continue talking about the evolution of the industry in the region because although we continue to make a lot of cotton garments, it is no longer all about basic production. Mainly Guatemala, which currently has a strong supply chain that offers diversified and flexibility by exporting products with high value added. We can demonstrate this by reviewing the figures that US Customs records both in dollars and square meters equivalent, and the average price of what the US imports from the world is 3.337. The average price of imports from capital region is 3.81, but the average price of Guatemala imports is 4.94. That shows the high value added of the garment that are being produced in Guatemala. Next. And as an example, some of the categories that are currently manufactured in Guatemala, active wear, sportwear, outwear, a lot of garments of casual wear categories like uniforms and workwear, but even children clothing, among others. Next. Now, the region has been becoming more attractive, not only for the placement of production orders, but also for new investments, starting with the pandemic that was a disruptive factor for the market, and now with other disruptions in the supply chain, the Central American region has taken a greater relevance. In the last 2 years, investment and reinvestments totaling more than 350 million can be announced only in Guatemala, and more than 1 billion in other countries of the region. And investment are mainly in spinning operations. Actually, Guatemala supports a portfolio of over 15 companies exploring investment opportunities in Guatemala and placing production orders for new product lines. Next. Now, if you ask what is so attractive about the Central American region and Guatemala in particular, I will share with you just some of the advantages that are offered. First, the proximity to the US market. And in the case of Guatemala, we have advantage of having ports in the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, which allow to supply both the East Coast and the West Coast. The other thing is electricity. Again, in the case of Guatemala, the most competitive price in the region offer an quality and stability of the energy facilitates the textile production. Another advantage of us is the flexibility to receive large production orders, but also small orders to allow to supply late market decisions. It's easy to do business here, being in the same time zone, and because of the easy of proximity that I mentioned, we have flights that allows us to be in a city in the US in 2 hours and a half in average. Our industry has a quick response. With the flexibility of the industry allows for a quick response for the client, offering company complete package programs in the vast majority of the cases. And the sustainability and awareness of responsibility in sustainability, but I will not mention this topic because right now Andrea will cover it. Thank you so much.
Let me switch. There you go. Just before Andrea jumps in, if there's any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer some of those. If you want to drop them on the chat for those who just joined, we have a good amount of people who just joined on this. And just to give some context also, Karen was talking specifically about the nearshoring we have with the US market. Just we had a good number of people joining. So I want to have that introduction before Andrea jumped in. So Andrea.
Okay, thank you, Pablo, and thank you, Sierra, for giving us the opportunity to express what we are doing right now in Vestex and how we are looking that sustainability matters are going around the world. So first of all, I think it is important, and next, please, to talk a little bit about what is happening today. And what we're looking is that today, consumer demand is still a powerful force in decision-making for brands, customers, and retailers. We are seeing that in one hand, there's a lot of rise of the fast fashion, and on the other hand, we've seen the evolution of fashion preferences with focus on more sustainable materials in garments making. So this has generated the need to know for the brands and customers of what and how their garments are being made. Next, please. So as Karin mentioned before, we have a lot of supply chain disruption that has happened, that has happened a few years ago. So first, we see the COVID-19 that created a big logistical crisis in which brands were struggling with the acquisition after products, and this created a lot of excess of inventories, which we believe today is a big problem with the waste of textile. It is said that waste will increase from 250 to 300% by 2050. So another thing that we believe is important to follow up is what the European Union is working with the Green Deal, specifically with the textile strategy and the eco-design directive. We're seeing in both movements that they have things like the extended responsibility, extended producer responsibility movement, as well as the battle against the greenwashing, which all of the environmental groups and consumers are battling because some of the brands were saying in their labels that the garments were sustainable, and in fact, there were no sustainable garments, right? Maybe the garments were made with more sustainable raw materials or with processes that used fewer resources. So what they are looking right now is more transparency, and that's why things like the digital passport in the Eco Design Directive is proposing, right? So please, next. So what we're basically looking here in Guatemala, and I could dare to say that around the world, is that there has been an increase in audit controls. Customers and brands wants to know that their manufacturers are being more efficient, that they are using fewer resources, managing indicators, and measuring each practice. Guatemalan manufacturers also have a lot of certifications. These have rapidly grown so that most of our Guatemalan manufacturers comply with 2 or more to keep their garments in the market. And we can see certifications such as GRS, RCS, the HIG-FEM, and many others regarding sustainability. So with all of this information, we can say that sustainability today is definitely not a trend, but it is a must. Next, please. So this is a message that I would like everybody to get in their head, because in order to be transparent, you have to measure. So you cannot manage what you do not measure. So there is a growing demand on sustainable practices, and it is very important for manufacturers to have a set of indicators, to be clear, to have trustable and easier communication. This will give them the transparency that brands are looking for. So it is important to share the process and to be transparent. And the only way to be transparent is by having indicators and measuring every movement that they make. Next, please. So why sourcing from the Cafeteria region? Well, we have much of things that I can talk about, but I want to mention 3 that I believe that are most important in sustainability matters. So first, the region's proximity to the US automatically reduces the CO2 emissions compared to sourcing from Asian countries. And for example, importing materials from Guatemala causes less emissions, like 84% less by sea and 69% less emissions by air. Another good thing is that our U.S. customer standards compliance, including adhering to new certifications and implementing better environmental practices. And also, Guatemala's energy grid is made up to 65% of renewable sources. Next, please. So, what are we doing here in Vestex to help our manufacturers? Well, Vestex has worked really hard to raise awareness and understanding among our apparel and textile companies about the local legislation they must comply with. Now, many companies have surpassed legal requirements and are now complying with the latest sustainability trends that their customers and brands demand. Also, we have worked in a lot of tools that are designed to facilitate the process on implementing initiatives for our manufacturers and to help our manufacturers meet their environmental responsibilities. And we have also worked in environmental campaigns, forums for exchanging good environmental practices among our association members, forums that raise awareness in new global initiatives, and guides to help them reduce the costing by increasing efficiency and information on certification using by the industry. Next, please. So how do we work in international spaces? Well, in Vestex, we are the only Central American chamber member of the X Sustainable Apparel Coalition. I can say X because it is now rebranded to this new name, which is Cascale. And being members of Cascale has given us the opportunity to position the industry around the world and also to be HIG-FEM trainers. We saw the need because many of our manufacturers were struggling to understand how to comply with the HIG-FEM. So we saw the opportunity, and now we are HIG-FEM trainers, and we train in Spanish, which is very important for our manufacturers. We also participate in other international events, discussing the association's active involvement in the promotion and support to our members, staying updated on trends, sustainable commitments, and legislation that could affect our manufacturers. So this is a very few summary of how do we see sustainability today in Vestex. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Andrea, with all of that. Well, before we move into some Q&A, I think there's like some things I didn't want to just open up with some of the things that we were just mentioning, specifically even uh with the digital passport. I think that's something that we've heard a little bit in the industry so far about becoming a digital passport, specifically with the Green Deal. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Andrea? I think specifically I have a quite like I think I'm still have wondering some of like how is that gonna work and how do you guys see it being implemented into the region?
Just to give you a second, I think Andrea has a little technical problem.
Sorry, I had a problem. Could you repeat, please?
I was just saying with the digital passport, that's something that I think we've heard about at some point, maybe read an article or from some other colleague. But can you tell us a little about that and how do you see that becoming maybe a thing in what's the CAFTA region?
Well, up to date, the digital passport information is not clear in the European Green Deal. But what I can say is that what they are looking for is for digital passport that can have all of the information of how the garment was being made. What they want is to give this transparent information to consumer. And what we are worried about is that maybe this digital passport can turn into a commercial obstacle. So it is very important to follow up what the Green Deal is working right now.
That's interesting. Thanks for that. Well, I think we'll open to some Q&As. I have some other questions and some people like gave me some questions here already. So if they have anything, we'll jump on the little chat. But Karen, we're talking a little bit about why it makes sense to invest in the CAFDR, specifically from an economical perspective. I think that's another thing that a lot of people care about. Obviously, we want to create a better future, more sustainable supply chain, but that has to make sense from an economical perspective, also from a business perspective. So we talked a little bit about that, but can you tell us a little bit about why it makes sense from an economical perspective directly to invest in the CAFDR than doing in any other country like around the world?
Well, I can mention in more specific about Guatemala, of course, but to be honest, one of the things that the people is looking for here is the economic stability. Guatemala has a very, very stable economic. When we review, for example, the exchange rate for the last 15 years, we almost have the same exchange rate. And of course, that is an advantage for the people because you have the stability to know in what way it's going on. And the other thing, when we review the qualification of the, let me say in English, de las calificadoras de riesgo, the risk qualification companies, they put in Guatemala in a very good position right now. Again, for the economic situation, for the political situation right now, then at the end, give the stability for the company.
And even from a nearshoring perspective, we're just talking a lot about this also from an inventory. I think we saw that during COVID, of how that was a big thing coming up, and things like it's not even changing. So even with the Red Sea happening like the last couple of weeks about being closed and all of this, I think it's just gonna become more of a trend with that. Like from an economical perspective, again, why it makes sense like to be in this region from a nearshoring of like the amount of inventory you can keep in hand.
Yes, well, at the end, we are very close with the market. I mentioned very, very short that the advantage, but we are from 3 or 4 days from port from Guatemala to the US. Then at the end, that support to the companies, so help to the companies to take decision for reorders or orders very, very fast. I think I mentioned very, very fast too about the new disruptions, but since the pandemic, the companies start to looking for options close to the US market. Right now, we see very, very strict decisions based on the US forced labor situation. And that's why actually we are attending companies from a lot of countries. We are seeing companies like Taiwan, China, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, for a lot of countries coming to Guatemala and to the region, because we are close to the market and actually we offer a lot of flexibility. Then we know we have to build some areas, for example, in wovens, we need more capabilities here, but we have the ability of the people to give and to produce a lot of garments for high quality. Then we are adding the stability and economic benefits for, in addition, the industry benefits and now the proximity benefits. Then Central America and Guatemala is a very good option to be close to the US market right now.
And what would you say, and I think I have two questions with the turnaround also. What's the average turnaround, and also with, like you're saying, like the capabilities and the capacity? I think that's something that for a lot, like in the capital region specifically, of like not being capacity, or like not being a specific products that we're looking for. But I think that that's changing of what I've seen in the last couple of years. But I think people might still have like some kind of perception of that. So can you tell us a little bit about those two things?
Well, first, I can mention since the last 2 years from here, all the Central American region double the spinning capability. And even the most products are in cotton. We start seeing more cotton and synthetics blends, of course. We have in Guatemala a very specialized investment from company from Spain that is that Nextil, sorry, and they are doing warp knit. Then I think it's an example of the things where we are seeing more and more in the region. Another new investment that we already have in Guatemala is a Colombian company that they are starting to produce woven shirts. Then when you review in detail all the list of the Guatemalan export, you can find a lot of garments that are seen producing here. Then we have space for every kind of garment.
That makes sense. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I wanted to hear from a different perspective also. That's why we've been investing like all this money. We just opened a whole new facility over $100 million with that, because we see the growth of this. It's not only something we want to talk about, but we also like when they are putting our money where our mouth is with all of this. But we need more people here. We need more people to be able to just come and just see what's happening for us to create a more sustainable supply chain. That takes me to like even what Andrea was saying. I think something we don't talk enough about is the CO2 emission that it creates from just transportation and shipping. Like just the number you're giving, about 84% just by water, and then like about 69% by air. That's a big number. If you ask me, that's a huge number. I think like we are pushing like everybody in the supply chain to be more sustainable. But what about the transportation? I think nobody talks much about that, and that's probably the biggest one that we have in supply chain. So yeah, I think it was very interesting to see that number that Andrea was mentioning with that. I don't know if you have any insight that like the measuring part. Do you, in the CAFTA region specifically, do we see like more people getting to start measuring that? Even with what you're saying, Andrea, about like if you cannot measure, you know, like specifically what you're doing, what you're claiming with all of this.
Well, we've seen that our manufacturers are preparing every day even more. They are investing in new equipments. They are implementing practices focused on measuring and reducing water consumption as well as energy. They are also investing in the installation of solar panels and power generations from renewable resources. They are also investment in wastewater treatment systems with the latest technology. They also make the production of recycled PET yarn. So what we're looking is that manufacturers are really worried about not only complying, but to be more efficient. For example, our manufacturers comply with 2 or more certifications that, as you know, comply with certifications is not easy, and it is also very expensive. So this can tell you the interest that our manufacturers has to comply and to also have measures, to also have indicators, and to provide all of this information to their customers. So I can say that today, measuring and having indicators is not a problem. Is not a big problem for manufacturers. They have been preparing for this for a long time. And another thing that I can say is that a few, let's say like 10 years ago, I didn't see an industry that was preparing for this, and they didn't have teams that were up to the latest sustainability trends. But up to date, manufacturers have departments dedicated only for sustainability initiatives. People is preparing and they are getting ready to comply with all of these sustainability trends. So as I said before, sustainability today is really not a trend, but it is a must if our manufacturers want to keep their garments exporting to the US and the European Union and around the world. And I could say that it is a must not only for our region, but also for all of the industry around the world.
Yeah, I think that's. I was gonna ask you something. I think you touched on that already a little bit, but what about those who would say if it's worth investment in all of this? Because you just mentioned that even like getting certifications and everything that is required, it's a lot, and then just like one or two, and when you have multiple, because there's the multiple people that you get to supply to, that obviously everybody has their own different ways of measuring those things. I think it's start adding up from a financial perspective, but also from a process perspective. There's like more process along the way. So what will you say to those that may wonder if it's worth investment in what's all of this sustainability practices, specifically from like a certification perspective?
Well, I could say that it is worth investing in it because first, as I said, it's one of the windows for manufacturers to enter new markets and to keep their products on the markets. Second, because it is also about saving money. And the last one, because it is important to take care of our resources, right? So from every perspective, being sustainable is very attractive because it is about using fewer resources and having a lot of saves. So innovation and production based on circularity is important today. So transparency and collaboration among our region is going to be the key to keep exporting and to let our manufacturers in Guatemala and the region keep growing.
I totally agree with that. Perfect. I think to get closer with some of this, I think the biggest question that everybody has would be what's going to happen in the next 5 years. Then everybody's like maybe expecting like a little ball with like and rate the future. Obviously nobody can say that for sure, right? But I think it'll be nice to get both of your takes from economical perspective, Karen, and from a sustainability perspective. Andrea, what are your takes for the next like 2-3 years, even to 5 years? What's going to happen in the textile industry, and specifically in the CAFTA region?
I really don't know what is going to happen in 3 years. I don't think anybody knows what's going to happen in 3 years in sustainability matters. What I can definitely say is that nobody has a unique meaning of what sustainability is. So that's why it is important to have indicators and to measure all of the processes. That is the only way that manufacturers are going to be able to prove that they are working better and that they are implementing better environmental practices, and that they want to comply with all of these requirements, right? So I could say that in 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, indicators are going to be most important than ever, and that measuring is the only way that our manufacturers are going to prove that they are working in sustainability way. So there's no one meaning of sustainability. The only way to say that you're sustainable is by measuring.
That's good. That's actually really good. Like that's really good. Yeah. Great. And thanks for that. Carrying from economical perspective, is the market gonna go up? Like, is market's gonna go down? What do we have to say there?
Well, I'm not the expert in the market situation, but I can see you and everybody is commenting that we are expecting a recovering of the market for this year. Even from Guatemala, we already see a small increase of the exports from January. Then I think will be a very, very slow recovery, but we are seeing the better things for this year. But in general, I can see in the short and the middle term very good things for the region in terms of investment and increasing the capability opportunities. A lot of retailers are pushing their vendors to come closer to the market, and Central America is the option. Then it is like an invitation. If somebody is not coming or not is not coming yet to discover Central American, please come and let us know in what way we can support to them to discover that opportunities. We are flexible, we are integrated in the region, we have different advantage in each country. Then I'm sure a lot of new customers can find in Central America an option for their production orders. Then I can see very good things for the region, very in the short term.
I agree. I think that's good. That's what else everybody wants to hear. And if I can take something from all of this, like even that, hopefully like a more brighter future coming with all of this. So if anybody has any questions, will be the time to like even like drop the last couple of questions here that I've received. And I would just like to close with how can we get more involved with Vestex also? Like obviously like we'll be sending some information about this, like if some of these things resonate with some people and would like to like discuss in detail how can they get involved with what you guys are doing, how you get support through Vestex, because I know the phenomenal job you guys are doing. We have a very close relationship with you guys for a while, so I think we can bet of the work you guys are doing. So I think if more people can get this support, I think it'll be phenomenal, because like that's how we can like keep making an impact in the industry. So we'll send some information for those wondering about Vestex, how to even contact them to like being able to reach out about some of this information in detail. But once what can we expect like about reaching out to Vestex and like from an industry professional?
Well, I don't know if we have our contact information in the presentation, but maybe through Sierra can get our emails, and we're more than happy to support the companies. We know each company has different questions, and companies has different, thank you, Andrea, different requirements. Then Vestex has a lot of areas that support the companies to understand not only the country, the market, the industry, and we are happy to support everybody.
Perfect. Well, here we have all the information. They beat me to it. But we'll send an email with this information as well to everybody.
Yes, I just type our emails at the chat so you can all have it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Karen and Andrea, for just the time today. I think it was it was very useful for me to hear some of the information. I think the part specifically about measuring what we're doing, I think that's a big take for me. Like seriously, I think like it's something we know, but it's like sustainability looks very different for everybody. So to have measures in place would be the name of the game moving forward with a lot of this. So I encourage anybody like here, like if you want to like hear about what other industry professionals or companies are doing to measure that, I think Andrea will be a really good resource to tell you more about that specifically. And if there's any other questions with that, like as I said, we'll be sending an email with this recording, the information from Karen and the rest of the team like in Vestex. And thank you so much for the time again, Karen, Andrea, and everybody that's joined the webinar.
Oh, thanks to you, Pablo and Sierra team.